You know, the emotion of that morning, probably that hour from 8 to 9 o'clock might have been like the longest hour of my career. After my blood stopped boiling, and I got over that part, you know, I realized that one of the things that I was going to have to do is own up to it.
Hey there, friend. This is Stephanie Crevens, and you are listening to the Midlevel Leaders Hot Mess Hotline, where we have conversations with CEOs and other top-level executives so that you, as a manager, a vice president, a director, can learn to think like an entrepreneur, learn to problem solve like those who are at the top of your organization, trying to unite all the different functions together into one powerful company. And today, my friend, you are in for a treat. I feel like I say that every episode, but every person I talk to, I just love them so much, one, and I love to bring their wisdom to you. So I always say, oh, it's such a treat. And it is, because it's a distinct privilege to know these folks that I bring on to this podcast. Most of them are friends. Most of them are colleagues. I literally can't help myself. When I hear about somebody doing good work, I've got to bring more of that to the world. So today we are having a conversation with Jeff Tunn. He has risen the ranks of IT here in Central Indiana, going all the way from entry-level IT up to being a CIO and strategic IT advisor for a national company. And he's out on his own now, actually. He's written a couple of really, really great books. He runs the Indy CIO Network. He gathers CIOs together every single month for learning and mentorship here in Indianapolis. And he runs the group called Tunn Enterprises. And so he is bringing career skills to IT leaders. He's bringing leadership skills to IT leaders here, not only in Indianapolis, but across the country. And he has a wonderful story to share with you today about, let's say, how technology can work against us in leadership sometimes, and how he used this scenario to bring even more vulnerability and transparency into his leadership. This is a story from almost 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, actually, but has as much relevance today as it did then. So let's dig in. Jeff, I just like to jump in. So tell us about your hot mess. Take us back, man.
Oh man. So this took place early in my career. I was working for a global organization, had just gotten promoted to the director level, probably within a few months of when this was happening. But so this would have been, I'll date myself and say it was in the 90s, probably late 90s. And the company was going through some reforecasting, shall we say?
Reforecasting.
It was almost a monthly thing to go through and look at budgets and say, here's what we need to do. And so, as we were looking at the year-end forecast, we were going to have to make some staffing adjustments, some reductions in force. One of the things I've learned since that time, because this was one of the first experiences I had with it, was it's one of the hardest things that you have to do in business. And it should be one of the hardest things that you should do. That's okay.
Absolutely.
Anyway, the situation was that as a director, we were each responsible for our areas, and we had to come up with a plan. And we had to put that plan in the format of a PowerPoint presentation, and then meet with our boss, the North American CIO, and provide him with, here's our plan. So I scheduled the meeting with him. I wrote my plan, had a great PowerPoint presentation, wrote my plan, and set up the meeting with him. And a few days after I set up the meeting, I had just set it up a week or so in advance, I started hearing from the rumor on the floor that my PowerPoint presentation was out in the open. Someone had found it and had shared it with my team because of an error on my part. I had attached it to the meeting invitation, right? Which means that anybody that had access to my calendar could open up that PowerPoint. And in fact, someone who probably had a little bit too much time on their hands was stalking my calendar and saw it and shared it with my team.
Yeah.
As you might imagine, it was a pretty big deal. I mean, this presentation went through my entire team, and it talked about, well, if we do this, then I would take these actions with these people. And if we do that, then I would take these actions with those people. And so it detailed it out in pretty good detail about what was going to be happening with people if we had to take those actions.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the situation.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So walk me through, just for context for folks, you're a director. How many people were in your span of control, and how many people were named by name in this PowerPoint as potentially being a reduction in force?
There were probably 150 people total in my span of control.
Okay.
Everybody's name appeared in the presentation, but there were probably 10 or 15 that were named as possible actions to take.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the first news they're getting is they're saying their name is on the chopping block, for lack of smoother words by Stephanie Crevens. You're much smoother than I am.
Absolutely. Yeah. What a horrible way to find out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What were your feelings at that point when you realized someone had gotten to your calendar, shared that information, and the plans were out there?
Can I say I was pissed? Can I say that on your show?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
This one, yes.
So I was pissed. Pissed. Yeah. I was really angry that I felt violated. Someone had violated my privacy. Yes, I know. I posted it on a meeting invite that was open, but I felt violated because what's someone doing looking at my calendar and opening up meetings that are on my calendar? They got no business doing that, right?
Especially in the late 90s, like technology and calendar sharing, like that was a whole different mindset back then than it is now. That transparency is normal. Yeah. Back then, that was like new.
And IT people have access to unbelievable data.
Great point.
And that's part of our ethics, is that we won't look at it. Right? I mean, that's part of that. It was an ethical violation in my Jeff Tunn code of IT professionalism.
Yes.
It was a violation of those ethics.
Yes.
So there was anger. Then there was the, oh shit, what do I do now? It's out there. There was really no way not to own up to it, right? I mean, it's out there and everybody knows it. So I don't even recall that I went to my boss to ask him what to do. I think I just, after my blood stopped boiling, and I got over that part, I realized that one of the things that I was going to have to do is own up to it. And because I did find out who had done it. So I actually knew the individual who had done it. And I had to get over that and get past that, right? Because more important than my hurt fifis were, I had a team that was now in fear of their jobs, which is a horrible place to be, right?
Yes.
And I had to address that.
Wow. So you walk into the office the next morning. What are the action steps you take? After I'm guessing a stiff drink and hopefully a little bit of sleep.
Probably more the stiff drink, probably less the sleep.
Yeah.
The first thing I did was I scheduled an all-team meeting, mandatory all-team meeting. Now, obviously in the 90s, this is before work from home, so everybody is pretty much in the office.
Yes.
So I scheduled a team meeting for that morning. I walk in, call it 8 o'clock in the morning, and scheduled a meeting for 9. that was a tough meeting to walk into. Yeah.
I am physically getting hot. I'm so nervous for what you had to face in that meeting. I'm like sweating for you right now.
Oh,
20 years
Steph,
later.
I was sweating
30
then
years
too.
later.
Let me
Oh
tell
my
you,
gosh.
I, you know, the emotion of that morning, probably that hour from 8 to 9 o'clock might have been like the longest hour of my career. I never really did ask anybody individually, what were you expecting to come out of this? But that was my perception. Is I think they thought I was going to be angry because they opened and read that PowerPoint.
I bet. Yeah. And I'm sure they've experienced that kind of defensive many times in their career. I mean, all of us have, right? The leader messed up, and instead of owning it, they project it onto the other people.
Yeah. Well, and even in my opening remarks, as you asked what I was feeling, is my first feeling was anger at the person or persons who had kind of done this, and so probably their expectation of me being angry was not that far removed, right?
Right. Oh, wow. So what were you like? How do you open a meeting like this?
I as I recall, I think I sat down. Normally in a meeting of that size, I would stand. And I'm pretty sure I sat down with them kind of surrounding in the room, right? Because we were pretty crowded in this conference room to get everybody there. And I said, I'm guessing by now that everybody has read that presentation. I want you to know, first of all, those are proposed actions. They are not decided upon actions. They are scenario planning of what could happen if this, and this happen, then we have to do this. And what you're seeing is my preparation in making those decisions, a little bit of my thought process in making those decisions. And aren't you glad to know, in some ways, and glad probably wasn't the right word, and I don't know that that's the word I used, but doesn't it make you feel a little better that we think about these things as directors and vice presidents, and that we try to plan for these things rather than doing an immediate ad hoc reaction to circumstances that get handed to us? And the other thing that I did was I said, what I want to do now is go through the deck with you.
Wow.
Because you've read it out of context.
Mm-hmm.
There was no talk track, right? I don't put notes in the notes sections of PowerPoints very often, right? And I certainly didn't do that back then. So there was no context for them to understand. And I don't even recall now if the drivers for the potential action were even described in the PowerPoint, right? It was more, if we get asked to do this, then this is what I think we need to do. There wasn't any of the environmental context to say, here's what's going on in the business.
Yes.
Here's why we need to. And so, as I recall, again, this was several years ago, obviously. The other thing that I did was I said, I really want to hear from you, but I want to give you that context first. So let's go through the deck together, and then I will open it up for whatever questions you have, whatever comments. This is a safe place. You can call me names. You can display anger. You can slam the door. Whatever you need or want to do, this is a safe place. We need to work through this together. Mm-hmm. Because when this meeting is over, we still all have jobs to do. And we've got to put this behind us. So that was kind of the approach that I took with it, Steph.
Wow. What was the larger business context that was at play? Was it lost revenue? Was it cash flow? Both?
Yeah, it was revenue end of month. So the organization Like a lot of publicly traded organizations, very stock price driven.
Okay.
Very quarterly results driven. When
Okay.
you give the report to the analysts, right? If you say you're going to have this amount in earnings, if you don't, then your stock goes plummet.
Yes.
And so we were in this position of being short on our projections. We were in the consumer products business, and it was a time when consumer products kind of deflated.
Oh, yes.
And so, there was a lot of things. It wasn't just our industry, but there was a lot of consumer spending was down. And we sold not luxury items, but we were the spend that people could eliminate, right? They had to eat. They had to have a roof over their head.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have to have a TV sitting in the other room, right?
Yeah. They didn't have to have 3 TVs. 2 is good enough.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So you're going through this meeting. As the meeting unfolds, you invite them to call you names. How are you what are you experiencing as a leader during all of this? Because I would imagine you've got like 300 eyeballs just staring.
Yeah.
Maybe 299 if everyone doesn't have 2 eyeballs. I don't want to make assumptions.
It was the fear and trepidation of sitting there in my office for the first hour. I wouldn't even walk around the office, right? I was just holed up in my office waiting for this meeting at 9. The fear and trepidation that I was feeling gave way fairly quickly, I'd say, once I started talking. And I made it a point to make eye contact with everybody that I could. I wasn't like looking at my desk or whatever. Mm-hmm. I was talking to them as people. And when I said, hey, you guys can call me names, you can get angry, I was a little nervous that someone would take me up on it. Quite honestly.
Fair.
I don't believe anybody did. I think there was some anger that was expressed. No one really expressed the why me. Why was my name one of those names?
Interesting.
But I did offer, the other thing that I did was I will meet one-on-one with each and every one of you, and we will talk about this one-on-one about your specific situation and talk through it so that you understand not only the context, not only the process, the mindset, but I also want you to know, Stephanie, if your name was on that list, here's why I was doing it and blah, 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 blah. So that you could talk through that. I think I had a handful of people take me up on that, as I recall, and I had some one-on-one conversations. At that point, none of the people on the list were on the list for performance reasons, right? It was, this is a function that we're going to have to live without.
Okay.
Kind of, or we've got 5 people doing this. We're probably going to have to try to get by with 4 people doing that job. Right. So there was some of the ranking, if you will. I hate that term, but some of the ranking of people versus people, but there always is when you're doing those kinds of things, right? Mm-hmm. So at least in the one-on-one sessions, there wasn't that conversation of you're doing a horrible job, but there were conversations about here's how you could improve, right? And the other thing that I remember talking through is there's no guarantees whether you're an A player or not. The cold hard fact, especially in the state of Indiana, is we're an employment at will state, and the company can say adios whenever they want to say adios. Mm-hmm. I hope they do it with much more compassion than that. But there was also some of that reality check, right? That I needed to make sure that people understood as well.
Yes, yeah. That our stable jobs are actually not as stable as we hope or wish that they
Well, they're not like the jobs when my parents had jobs and their parents had jobs where you
Mm-hmm.
go work at the factory for 30 or 40 years and retire with a nice pension. By the time we were in the 90s, we were starting to see more. We see more of it today, but in the 90s, we were starting to see the beginnings of that's just not the case anymore.
That's right.
You don't go work for the same company for 30 or 40 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Loyalties were changing. Retirement plans were changing.
Yes.
Pension protection was changing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so what was the sense in the room at the end of the meeting?
I don't think anybody was ready to carry me out on their shoulders like Newt Rockney or anything like that after the victory speech, right? But I think
I was thinking more like Frankenstein when the mob goes to
yes, yeah, that was probably more
Frankenstein.
like it. I think people kind of filed out quietly. A couple of people thanked me for being candid. Um, thanked me for being honest and admitting to the mistake, which is part of what I did do that I can't recall. As part of what I was saying to the group was
Mm-hmm.
Admitting that it was a mistake to attach it to a meeting and allowing it to be out there in the wild. I would be more careful in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And so rather than saying, hey, you shouldn't have been stalking my calendar and you shouldn't have shared this, no one in my sphere of influence was the person that found it. The person that found it worked in a different part of the organization, but he shared it with everybody. And so no one in the room was guilty, so to speak, but I wasn't looking for guilt. I was looking for, I'm sorry, this was not the way to find out.
Yes. Yeah. Because it's not that you did something wrong. You made a mistake in judgment. You're just human. Like that's all there is to it. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's important for leaders to do, right? We have to admit when we made a mistake.
Yeah.
Because we're going to make mistakes. We are human. And you and I talk to executive leaders all the time. And this is something that I carried with me and further developed in my career as I rose through the IT ranks to become CIO. Is being vulnerable is a significant skill set to develop in a leader. Mm-hmm. Admitting mistakes is a significant skill. Doing it the right way, being transparent. Yes, there are some things that you can't share with staff, and there's regulations around some of those things. But with the information that we can share, being as transparent as possible. And the other thing that I learned as a result of this incident, and then further developed in my career, is the why. People need to know the why behind some of our decisions. And so if we can take the time to set the context and explain the why, they may not agree with the conclusion that we came to, but they'll at least appreciate the process that we went through. Mm-hmm. And they may agree with the why, but still disagree with the decision.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. So just to stay in the hot mess for just a little bit, just to make you uncomfortable. I'm still sweating over here. I'm just hope our listeners are sweating like, oh gosh, like, this sounds terrible. You leave the meeting, you have some one-on-ones. When did those decisions get made? How did that unfold from there?
Oh, wow. So there was a lot in between. We had to make some of those decisions a couple of months later, but not to the depth, not even to the depth of my best option, right? Because I'd laid out various options. This is kind of the first step. We didn't even have to go that far.
Okay.
And I learned from going through that experience that having those conversations with the people that are impacted is is incredibly important to them. And showing empathy, showing that vulnerability is an important part of those conversations. And unfortunately, in my career, I've had to have those conversations a lot. And they never get easier, and they never should get easier.
That's right.
And I tell new managers, new directors that all the time. If it's easy to take those actions, you're in the wrong job. You just should not be doing that. It should be hard. It should be damn hard, and it should keep you up at night. As we progressed through that year, unfortunately, it was not the only time that we had to take those actions. As we were going through, I wish I could remember the exact year. It probably was 97 or 98, somewhere around in there, pre Y2K. I know not everybody measures life by Y2K, but those of us who've been in IT for 40 years measure life by Y2K.
I could see that.
So
that was traumatic for a whole other set of reasons.
Yes, it was. So I think it was pre Y2K, as I recall. But the other thing that happened out of this is I was able to, and I don't think this was something intentional on my part. It was more, I shared what happened with my peers, so the other directors. Keep in mind, I was a brand new director, and so I was sharing this with folks on the team that had been directors for 4, 5, 6 years. And I was also able to share it with my boss. And I don't know that, I think I'd be a little cavalier to say I was intentionally managing up by doing that. It was more letting him know what happened and what I did about it. But I'd like to think that we all got a little bit more empathetic, more compassionate about what was going on in the organization as we progressed through those times.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic lessons. I want to take a quick commercial break, and then I want to come back, and I would love to hear from you, because I love your heart. Like, how does an empathetic conversation go? Like, what do you share with people? Because certainly since the 90s in leadership, the definition of transparency has changed drastically. What does that mean now for leaders so that they can manage their peers, manage their reports, manage up as applicable, and do that with empathy? So let's take a quick break, and we'll come back.
All right.
This season of the Hot Mess Hotline is brought to you by my Hot Mess Quiz. One of the common lessons that my clients learn during coaching is how to really evaluate a problem, dissect it for clarity, and then take action on the tasks that really move the needle. The Hot Mess Quiz can bring you that focus too. As a leader, your work life is full of, well, work. But according to Pareto, 80% of that work isn't even impactful. If you need to create growth and change, you need to focus in on what truly matters and what will drive new results. Take the Hot Mess Quiz by clicking on the link below, which is stephaniecrevens.com/Hot Mess Quiz. Just like this podcast promised, and this is in the real world too, what happens when people stop being polite and start getting real? That's what you're going to get in this report. It's going to be tailored to your business hot mess to tell you exactly where to focus your efforts first, and then how to bring your team along to get the change that you need to create. Go to stephaniecrevens.com/Hot Mess Quiz. Don't wait another minute to start becoming the pro troublemaker you've always wanted to be. Well, so Jeff, let's just jump back into this conversation. A lot has changed is an understatement from the 90s coming into 2021 about leadership. I mean, just even thinking about having 150 people in one room right now is like, we don't even do
you
that
wouldn't
now.
even imagine that, right? Yeah.
What a different time. Like all the things I was picturing, I was like, wow, we don't do that.
150 people in the room and not one mask, I'll tell you that.
Mind blown, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, 2021. What different
Uh,
time.
yeah, right.
But you eventually rose from director into the CIO suite, and
Yes.
this was one of those transformative events.
Mhm.
What specifically, you mentioned it, but what specifically did it change for you about how you delivered and displayed empathy to your people?
Empathy is such a key part of who I am as a leader.
Mhm.
It I'd have to say that this was one of probably many events that helped me grow that trait in as part of my leadership toolkit. You know, when especially in the 90s, when you went into management, the mantra was you cannot be friends with your staff, but you can be friendly.
Mm,
And I subscribed to that. It's like I had all these friends and now I got promoted and I can't hang out with you anymore. Right.
yes.
I lost a lot of friends that way. That event and others as I progressed through my career over the next, call it the next 3 to 5 years, helped me to understand that the reason that you're told that as a new manager is because it makes your job easier.
Ah.
Right? If I'm not
Yes.
your friend, Stephanie, and we have to have a crucial conversation, I don't have any emotion in it, right? Because I don't really know you
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. So even if it's a performance conversation or it's the ultimate reduction in force conversation, it's a lot easier for me to stay up here if we don't have a friend relationship. But if we're
That's right.
friends and I know your spouse and I've met your kids and I know you just bought a new home and I know you're looking at a new car and I know your daughter is getting ready to go to college and oh, by the way, I need to lay you off.
Oh,
Right? You have to come with you got to put yourself in their shoes. And what would it be like to hear those words yourself, knowing that the moment that you tell them that, they're not going to hear another damn thing you say because their brain's going to go to all that.
Yes.
Right. And so you do it with empathy, you do it with compassion. I can remember in my first CIO role, I worked for a commercial real estate company. And you might recall 2008, 2009 was not kind to the commercial real estate industry. And we're going through drastic downsizing. And I can remember sitting across the desk from my employees, and I was the one crying as I was having this conversation with them. Because I knew what it was doing to them. Right. And probably the youngest guy that was in on our team, he'd been out of college a year or something. And this is the first time this is happening to him. Not only is it the first time happening to him, it's probably the first time he's ever seen it happen. Oh my gosh. And it has to be raw. It has to be raw because you got to, as I said, you got to meet people where they are and understand that once you rip that Band-Aid off and you deliver that message, they're hearing nothing. Typically, what I try to do at that point is stop freaking talking. And that's kind of hard for me to do.
That's why we're friends.
Yeah, let them react a little bit, give them a few moments to gather themselves, ask if they have questions, and then give them the freedom to leave the office. Right? We can talk more about this later. We can go over the details later, but right now you need to focus on you. And you probably have people in your family you need to talk to right now. Yes. So we'll talk later. So kind of ending it that way. But empathy, vulnerability, transparency, it's not the only time that you exhibit those is not when you're having to have these horrible conversations, right? That's a trait that any leader, anytime, needs to be able to put themselves in the other person's shoes and understand their motivations, understand what they're trying to achieve in their career, help them grow in their career. Because if you can't meet them where they are, they certainly can't meet you where you are.
That's right. I have so many clients when I'm coaching, leadership level, and they're frustrated with an employee. And I say, what motivates that person? And they say, I don't know. And then their homework that I invite them into to commit to is, well, you need to go ask them that question. What motivates you about this work so that you can meet them where they're at? We forget those simple, I want to use the word basic, but that's not the right. It's more like fundamental, these fundamental things. Why are you here? So I can give you more of that so we can work together.
Yes. There's always the job to do. You have to get, the work has to get done. Right. But understanding not only what motivates someone, but what communication style do they like? Right. Do they just want just the facts? Right. Tell me what to do and when you need it by, and I'll go do it. Or do they need the story behind why, the greater context of, hey, Stephanie, I need you to go do this. Well, why? Well, because of this, this, and this. I have to know that about the other person. And the only way to do that is to get to know them, ask them questions, have conversations, be empathetic, and try to appeal to what drives them.
Because oftentimes leaders assume that what drives them as the leader is what drives their people. And then there's missed expectations. Missed opportunity for empathy.
I'm very passionate about my career in information technology. If I assume everybody that's in information technology is passionate about it as I am, I'm going to be very disappointed. Right? Because to some, it's just a job. Right? It's a paycheck. It enables them to do the things they like to do after work. They don't want to work 45, 50, 60, 70 hours a week. And that's okay. Well, maybe the 40 hours. They probably got to work the 40 hours.
Yes.
but you can't expect your teams to put in those kinds of hours just because that's the way you may be.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and I was having a flashback to the wonderful IT leaders panel that we did on resilience. And one of the panelists shared, and this is up on the podcast too, like when she was able to get into IT and earn the income that IT offers to many folks, especially her as a first generation African-American college graduate, she could use that income to pay for her grandparents' diabetes medication.
Yeah.
Remember when Angel shared that? I mean,
yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Like, this is why some people need and want to come to work.
Yes.
And we need to give people more of that.
Yes.
And make it possible.
That
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Tell me more about, what does vulnerability look like for you as one of the top level leaders in an organization?
I think vulnerability, it's a tightrope, admittedly, because at that executive level, there are people that are watching you for how you react to situations. And if you react with confidence, calmness, and all of that, then they're going to feel that way too. Right. But vulnerability is also admitting when you don't know. It's admitting that, hey, we're going to try this strategy. I don't know if this strategy is going to work, but we're going to try it. Vulnerability, as I said, is admitting mistakes because we will make them. It's when the pandemic is hitting, right? 18 months ago, it's admitting that you're worried too about what it's going to do and showing that human side. That, I guess that's the best way to say it, is showing that human side, showing that emotion, I think is an important part of leadership, and sharing stories of your work experience, but also sharing, stories of your family and things that are going on there. I can remember Aaron Stone, who was my boss at Intervision. Aaron's the CEO at Intervision. And he did a presentation for Sales Kickoff. This was a couple of years ago. And the story that he told was the story of his son learning to shoot free throws. And there was a lot of context around it. I'm not going to do the story justice, but my point is that was vulnerability, right? Mm-hmm. Aaron shared this story of his son and these moments that he shared with his son. In that moment, he was a person to the people in that room, not just the CEO.
Yes.
Right. And I think vulnerability, we always think of the admitting you're afraid, admitting whatever it is. But this was also, you could see the pride on his face as he told this story. Right. And that's being vulnerable.
That's so beautiful, because people have made up so many stories about that man and his family just because his title is CEO.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any of it true. It's, right. Mid-level leaders and independent contributors, they're going to say, oh, he's different. He's in another planet than I am. And the truth is he's not.
Exactly.
Yeah. So a few last questions to help mid-level leaders understand, what does it really take to be in the C-suite? And I'll let you get back to some of your own pro troublemaking here in the world.
I do like to make trouble, as you know. Yeah.
I do. I love it. You've been in that C-suite. You've had to make really tough decisions. What do you wish mid-level leaders knew about what it means to be in those shoes? In good times and in bad?
Whew. That is a great question. I do realize that trust and respect have to be earned, but sometimes it would be great, and I wish I'd known this when I was a mid-level manager, give the leaders a benefit of the doubt.
Mm-hmm.
You may not know, you won't know everything that they know. And so if they're making a decision, taking an action that you disagree with, at least give them the benefit of the doubt that they've thought through it, or that they're privy to more information than you are.
Yes.
Right? It still doesn't mean you have to agree with the decision, but don't go around the office saying, man, can you believe Ton did that? I can't believe he made that decision. Well, you don't know everything that's going on. So I think that's one of the things that, as you become a leader, knowing that other leaders are thinking through these things and making those decisions, right? It goes back to the hot mess example of, don't you feel somewhat comforted that we think about these things and we plan these things?
Before it gets to that conversation. Yeah. I think especially IT leaders. So a team member and I were doing a training, and she said, assume positive intent to a group of IT leaders. And that is so true. So like, if you're in IT, you have two different APIs, right? What's the first API stand for? Something protocol.
I forget. Application programming interface, API, application programming interface.
There we go. So you have that one. But the most important one when you're dealing with people is assume positive intent. Assume you don't have all the information.
Yep. Yeah, I was just talking with our friend Alex Perry this morning, and we were talking about don't use acronyms, and then you throw one at me like that. It's like, oh no, what does it mean?
Whoops. I got a lot to learn from Alex Perry, apparently. Story of my life. I don't know it all.
I certainly don't either.
That's right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So any resources, books you'd recommend for mid-level leaders who strive to be in that C-suite who are ambitious enough to say, I want that too one day?
My favorite leadership book of all time, hands down, it's one I recommend to everyone, is the book Leadership and Self-Deception.
Whoa.
Fabulous, fabulous book. It's told in kind of a story form. Well, it is a story form, but the lessons are powerful. You know, it probably came out in the mid 2000s, so it's been out for a while now, but it still resonates. I pick it up and reread it every once in a while just to remind myself that, you know, as leaders, we have to look at ourselves without any of the guises of self-deception. Right? We all have biases, and we have biases about ourselves as well. And it's like critical thinking, questioning your assumptions. Critical think about yourself. Question your assumptions, question your biases as a leader.
Yes.
And it makes you a much stronger leader.
Yes. And you can do that regardless of your title, starting as soon as you stop play on this podcast.
That's right.
Use self-coaching, ask yourself critical questions. Like the tapes that bounce around in our head are just tapes. Doesn't make them true. The things that wake you up in the middle of the night and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired because of this. Probably not true. It's just a tape in your head.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good stuff. And I'm going to add a layer to that. And it's, if you're not yet in the C-suite, stop sugarcoating stuff to the C-suiters and tell them the truth.
Yes.
Kindly, diplomatically, but too many people put on some kind of face with top leadership where they sugarcoat so much information that the leader just gets very vague feedback and they don't really know what to do with it.
Yes.
Be willing to share hard information. Be willing to admit when you make mistakes and say, here's how I fixed it. Be willing to say, it's not all perfect and sunshine and roses in my department. And here's what I'm going to do about it. That's going to get you into the C-suite pretty fast, actually.
And be willing to tell them when they're wrong.
Yes.
That takes a strong relationship to be able to do that and do that well. As we've been saying, leaders are going to make mistakes. Tell me when I've made a mistake. Tell me when I've done something wrong. Yes. To your face, not by sharing your PowerPoint slide deck with everyone, but you. Exactly. Yeah. Don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah. I may send the link to this podcast to the person that did that. I hope in that time frame they've learned their lesson. I hope so. I hope so too. Well, gosh, Jeff, thank you so much for sharing this story, how your discomfort led to something really wonderful. Unfortunately, that's the best way us humans learn. So. Yeah. It really is. It really is. Well, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Stephanie. It's been fun, as all our conversations are. True story. All right. Thank you, Jeff. Oof. All right, my friend. That is the conversation with Jeff Ton of Ton Enterprises. Can you feel his heart? Can you feel the emotion and the empathy that he brings to his job? I mean, just thinking about those scenarios that he had to work through, just as I said in the recording, makes my armpits sweat a little bit. I mean, that's some tough stuff. When you accept the responsibility of leadership, this is what you accept responsibility for, to be human, to work with humans and figure it out together. I want to capture for you a few of the highlights or some of the insights from our conversation that I think are especially poignant for mid-level leaders. One, you got to learn your lessons from those oh shit moments, my friend. Like, there's so much that we can glean from when things don't go according to plan. You know, it's not that Jeff made a mistake per se. You know, the way he loaded a file into a calendar maybe wasn't the best, but it wasn't a mistake. He didn't mess up. He just didn't exactly think through the process. You know, think about how many times you've done that where you didn't exactly think about the implications of your process and it didn't play out the way that you expected it to. Can you own up? Can you say, you know what, that didn't go the way I planned and
I won't do that again. As a leader that demonstrates vulnerability and transparency, sometimes that's all that it takes is, I didn't think through that 3 steps ahead of what I did. My bad. I will not make that mistake again, right? Own up to what you did, your part that you played. I want to articulate for you the process that Jeff went through to face the music with his team, in the hopes that you can use the same process when you have to own up to something as well, or at the very least, have a really, really hard conversation. So one, he called that all team meeting sooner rather than later, right? It happened on let's say a Tuesday afternoon. By Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., that entire team of 150 people were meeting together so that he could let them air their grievances, so that he could provide context. So one, call that all team meeting as soon as possible. 2, provide opening remarks where you set the stage for what that conversation is going to be like, where you can apologize, where you can admit where you went off the rails, where you can admit where you should have done better, and where you can give people grace to feel their feelings. Give them a safe space to bring up some of that tough stuff too. Don't make it just about you at the podium. Make sure you give everyone the opportunity to be seen and heard and understood. Provide context for the situation. You heard Jeff describe, all they had was a PowerPoint deck. They didn't have the full context. They didn't understand exactly what was going on in the business. Make sure you provide context for that one tool or that one scenario or that one piece of information that they have. Helping people understand the why is your job as a leader, plain and simple. That is your job. Create a safe place. Step 4, create that safe place for people to have feelings, to express them, to ask their questions, to make statements about what's going on with them so that they feel seen and heard and understood. At our core as human beings, this is all that we want in the workplace, is to feel seen and heard and understood. Frankly, not just in the workplace, everywhere in the world. 5, invite those one-on-ones after the meeting. Create the space so that people can come ask you those questions that they don't want to in front of the whole group. And see the opportunity in the problem. Did you hear Jeff bring up, hey, you might be on this list, and here's why, and it wasn't necessarily performance related, but when I had to juggle all these different criteria, this is why you were on the list of potentially having your job eliminated. Here's what you can do to maybe bump up your rankings here. Be honest with people and see the opportunity that exists in every single challenge. And number 7, have a direct conversation with those who are directly impacted. Don't avoid those tough conversations. Use this instead as an opportunity to display empathy and vulnerability. All right, my friend, it is time to get off the internet, turn off this recording, get back into the impactful work that you must get done today. Do it with the insights that you've learned from Jeff Tunn's leadership, and I'll see you next time, my friend.